Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Farm, and today we're going to join my counterpart from Montana to talk about the recent United States Supreme Court decision, Espinosa versus Montana Department of Revenue. This is about parents and their choice for education. So let's chat about that. Aloha, everybody, and welcome back to our show, Faith in Politics. And today we have a very exciting and special guest who's going to talk about one of the Supreme Court decisions that came down in the last few days. There's been a couple we haven't been too happy about, but this is one that we are. And so I'd like to welcome to the show Jeff Laszloffy. Jeff, I'm not going to say this right, so help me pronounce your name properly.
Jeff Laszloffy. It's a good Hawaiian name. Aloha keakua, Eva.
It is, and I'm so happy to have Jeff. Jeff is my counterpart. Again, as a second introduction, I'm Eva Andrade. I am the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And today our guest, Jeff, is my counterpart from Montana. And Jeff is the president of the Montana Family Foundation. And he's going to be sharing with us one of the good Supreme Court decisions that happened recently. So Jeff, before we jump into that, I want our viewers to know and love you just as much as I do. So give them a little bit of background about you and how you have some island ties.
I do. I actually grew up in Hawaii, on Oahu, on the windward side, but I spent a lot of time in Kaimuki. I graduated from St. Louis a long time ago. So my heart is still in Hawaii. My wife and I get back every couple of years, I think, for sure, whenever there's a class reunion. And the good thing about being from Hawaii and getting to see Eva is we immediately revert back into Pidgin as soon as we're together. So
We do. Jeff is one of the few people that understands that when I'm participating in mainland meetings, sometimes I'm like a deer in a headlight because we do things, as you all hear me say every week. Politics in Hawaii is different than how they experience politics on the mainland. So, Jeff, now that we know you have a little bit of Hawaii ties there, what kind of difference do you see between Hawaii politics and politics, say, in Montana?
You know, ironically, it's politics in Hawaii and politics in Montana are similar. Hawaii is a Democrat state and Montana is a Republican state for the most part. But both states have such a sense of community. Everyone knows everyone. Everybody just has this sense of, in Hawaii you call it a sense of ohana, but we just have this sense of community, and we have that in Montana too. And you live or die in politics on your reputation, and the same thing happens in Hawaii. So we want to, first and foremost, we want to be salt and light. We want to be winsome when we're in the legislative sessions. Even when the battle gets heated, we need to remember who we serve and why we're there. But there's a lot of similarities. Then, and the differences are basically Hawaii's a lot more liberal than Montana. And, I know that makes it a little more difficult to operate in the realm that you do in Hawaii. But by and large, it's, just Hawaii's one big, family. And we experience the same thing in Montana.
Yeah, and we remind our viewers every week that even though we do things differently here in Hawaii, we are still very much in connection with what's happening on the mainland. And a lot of times, as you know, Jeff, what happens on the mainland will end up on Hawaii's back door. Now, the issue we're going to talk about today is a really interesting one. And so, viewers, if you need to go and pause this really quick, if you're watching it live or if you're watching it on YouTube, go and get a cup of coffee because I think you're really going to be excited about some of the content we're going to talk about. So what we're going to talk about is on Tuesday of this week, the Supreme Court handed down a decision on Espinosa versus Montana Department of Revenue. But all of this started with a group of mothers in Montana who just simply wanted to provide their keiki a good education. So Jeff, can you take us back to where we ended up?
I can, and the lawsuits actually began about 5 years ago, but the story begins about 11 years ago. The Montana Family Foundation decided that it was important that we provide options in education in our state for children who might not be doing well for one reason or another in a traditional public school setting. So we just felt like if there was if there was a broad array of options, then maybe the students would do better. And that was my story actually growing up in Hawaii. When I was 14, going to public school, I was in danger of dropping out of school. And my parents took me out of that situation, sent me to St. Louis, and I just blossomed in it. And it was a good education, but the bigger deal was it was just a change of venue. It was a change of setting. And so when somebody came to me and asked if we would do school choice as an issue with the foundation in Montana, it just really resonated because I just thought back, that's me growing up. And so we wrote the first school choice bill in Montana in 2009. It was a tax credit scholarship bill. So a person or a corporation could give money to a scholarship granting organization, capture a tax credit, and the money would go to allow a student a scholarship to go to the school of their choice, including a private religious school. And that was the stated goal of the legislature. And so the bill finally passed in 2015. Took us that long, from 2009 to 2015, to get the bill passed. And then immediately the Montana Department of Revenue stepped in and said, okay, we're going to allow these scholarships to be used at any school in the state except private religious schools, because in Montana's constitution we have something called a Blaine Amendment, and you have one in Hawaii too. And so Blaine amendments are basically amendments in state constitutions that say that public dollars may not be used, in our case and your case, either directly or indirectly, to subsidize the education of a child in a private religious school. And it came about in 1875, a long time ago. Senator Blaine from Maine was trying to get that language adopted into the U.S. Constitution, and he failed, but 37 states adopted that language in their state constitutions, and it's been there ever since. In the case of Montana, it's been there for 131 years. And so the Montana Department of Revenue fell back on that language and said, we're not going to allow it because these scholarships to be used at religious schools, because we think it's a violation of Montana's constitution. So that's when the lawsuit started. Now, we had already prepared for this. We knew when we were drafting the bill that the teachers' unions and others like that were going to oppose it at every turn. And so just before the Montana Family Foundation drafted the first school choice bill in Montana, there was a case out of Arizona on a similar tax credit scholarship bill. And that case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and our side won. And the court ruled fairly narrowly. They didn't touch the Blaine issue. They just said that tax credit scholarships were allowable in states with Blaine amendments because it was a tax credit. The money had not yet transferred from the private to the public sector, and so it was not an appropriation of public dollars. So that's as far as that decision went. So when we started drafting the bill in Montana, we called the attorney. His name is Dick Comer from the Institute for Justice. And we called Dick and we said, listen, we'd like you to help us draft this bill, and we want you to help us use the language that the Supreme Court used in the Arizona case. So basically what we wanted to do was feed the court its own language back as a memo in bill form. And so that's what we did. We used their own language. We drafted this bill, and Dick helped us. And then when in 2015, when this passed and was declared unconstitutional by the State Department of Revenue, they don't get to declare things unconstitutional, but they did. When we began to litigate the case, Institute for Justice led on the litigation. They found 3 single mothers that were getting these scholarships whose children had gone to Stillwater Christian Academy, and their ability to go there was now jeopardized because they didn't get these scholarships anymore. And so Institute for Justice brought them on as the plaintiffs in the case, and the lead plaintiff is Kendra Espinosa, and that's why the case is Espinosa versus Montana Department of Revenue. What people don't understand is this case was seen as a really serious case from the very beginning. And so when the Institute for Justice began to litigate it in Hawaii or in Montana, we won 2 lower court decisions in the district courts. And ironically, they cited the U.S. Supreme Court language that we had embedded in the bill. And then we went on to the Montana Supreme Court, and the Montana Supreme Court struck the legislation down as unconstitutional. And they made a big deal about citing the Blaine Amendment in Montana's constitution, which was really good because those of us in the school choice movement have been looking for years for a way, for a perfect case with a perfect set of facts to challenge these Blaine amendments. And the Montana Supreme Court served it up to us on a silver platter. And so we went ahead and filed suit. One in the two district courts, lost at the Montana Supreme Court, moved to the federal or the U.S. Supreme Court and filed an appeal. And for those who may not know, the U.S. Supreme Court gets somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 cases a year that are requested to be heard, and they only accept about 50 of them. And so it's the chances of getting a case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court are very, very slim. But they did accept this case. And so at that point, and the other thing was when we had to find local counsel to back up the Institute for Justice in the Montana case, the former U.S. attorney for the state of Montana stepped up to the plate. So we had the U.S. attorney arguing on our side, and then we moved on to the U.S. Supreme Court. And for that case, I happened to be in the courtroom when that case was heard in January. Dick Comer, who had argued the original case out of Arizona, came out of retirement and argued the case, and he split his time, our time, the appellate time, between himself and the United States Solicitor General. And so we had the top attorney in the United States arguing on our behalf. And that's how important this case was seen. And so anyway, we waited until the end of June, and just before the court adjourns, we get our decision. And the court could have either ruled narrowly like they did in the Arizona case, or they could rule broadly. And they ruled about as broadly as we could have ever hoped for. And they went to the issue of Blaine amendments, and they said Blaine amendments are patently unconstitutional. And so not only did the children of Montana, the parents and the taxpayers, benefit from this decision, but we were able to strike unconstitutional, religiously discriminatory language from 37 state constitutions. That's how big this case is.
Yeah, we just really want our viewers to understand how hard you worked, Jeff, on this particular issue, as you mentioned, because not only was this going to benefit all of these people, it was a passion for you. It was something that you wanted to make a difference. So I want to share with our viewers a quote that you gave in your press release, and then I want you to hash this out a little bit.
Sure.
What you said was, the Supreme Court today righted a 131-year-old unconstitutional wrong that had at its root anti-Catholic bias. This decision was a huge victory for Montana kids and clears the way for Montana to join 42 other states that allow students the freedom to choose a school that fits them best. So where do we go from here? I mean, first of all, that's a beautiful statement, and thank you so much for fighting on behalf of kids across the United States and parents to choose the best education for their kids. I really want to applaud you for your work on that. But so where do we go? This is a great decision, Jeff. I mean, we're at a point where we had some horrible rulings that came out of the Supreme Court, right before this one. And so I think a lot of people in the faith-based community got really excited on this because it was something we could really, really hold on to and be excited about. So where do we go from here?
Well, let me back up just for a second. You said something that reminded me of something that I want to talk about. So these Blaine amendments had their root in anti-Catholic bias. Senator Blaine wanted to stop the proliferation of Catholic churches across the United States because there were a lot of Irish Catholic immigrants at that time. And so this is the way he chose to do it. So these state amendments had at their core just a heart of discrimination, religious discrimination. And so we attacked that, and the court picked that up and made several references to it, both in the opinion itself and in the concurrent opinions. So that's important to note. But coming forward now, what does this mean for all of us? What it means is that the other side doesn't get to use this discriminatory language anymore in the constitutions. It means that your group, Eva, can begin to move forward with school choice in Hawaii, and they can't say that that the Blaine Amendment is blocking it anymore, because it's not blocking it now. It means that the kids that are struggling in a school for one reason or another, maybe it's just not a good fit, maybe they're getting bullied, they can go out into what eventually we hope is a broad array of educational options and find that perfect educational fit for them so that they can thrive and stay in school and not become a statistic and drop out.
I think that is so important. And so for our viewers watching, if you're starting to get excited about this, you should be. And stay tuned to Hawaii Family Forum, and you can visit us on the web. We'll put our website there on the bottom. If you want to read more about this case, I really encourage you to go to the Montana Family Foundation website, which we'll go ahead and list that on the bottom, so you can see a lot of the things that Jeff has done over the past years to benefit the families in Montana. But as he mentioned earlier, he's part local boy, so I think he's always going to have a little bit of a heart towards what happens here in Hawaii. And so as we start getting our time starts getting less and less, which always happens on these shows, we want viewers in Hawaii to understand that our legislators here have not been really excited about doing anything on vouchers or talking about other ideas for educational choice. But this just very well maybe, as Jeff mentioned, that catalyst to get us to start moving in that direction. So Jeff, do you have any words of advice for people in Hawaii that might be really wanting to do something with this great announcement? I mean, what can the church do?
I do. So as we've gotten spent more and more time with the school choice community across the United States, I've come to realize that school choice really is not a Republican or Democrat issue. Some of the biggest proponents of school choice in the United States, and some of the states with some of the best school choice programs, are liberal states. And it's because in a lot of communities, especially inner city communities in Chicago and New York and places like that, kids are trapped in failing schools. And parents are parents no matter where you are. Everybody wants what's best for their kids. And so parents want to take advantage of school choice programs. And I think that we need to just find some champions in the Hawaii legislature, both in the House and the Senate, and find those people that just really have a heart. Find somebody maybe with a backstory like mine, the kid that was failing in school, that suddenly, my parents were just regular people. My mom was a nurse at Castle Hospital. They were just regular middle class people, and they sacrificed a lot to send me to a private school because they knew that I was on a path that wasn't going to end well. And that's just the way parents are. And so I think that the future is bright in Hawaii right now. You're going to have a lot of opposition. You will have opposition for sure from the teachers union because they want their system to be a one-size-fits-all perfect system for everybody. But we all just know that it's not. And you can start with the dropout rate. That's what we did in Montana. We looked at the number of kids dropping out of school every year and began to publicize that number. And it made the legislature embarrassed in Montana when they heard about the number of kids that were dropping out. And then we talked about the remediation, the number of kids that actually graduate from school, go on to college, and have to take remedial classes just to catch up so that they can actually start the course of study that they're there to take. And so when people start to hear these figures, they realize that we can do better. And school choice needs to be part of that. And the good thing is we don't have to reinvent the wheel now. We have now with Montana joining, we have 43 states with some type of school choice out there. And a lot of states like Florida and Arizona have everything you could ever want in terms of school choice, bells and whistles, every type of school choice ever imagined those states have. And the good thing is they're acting like the laboratory. And so we can look at those states, we can see what's working and copy that. We can look at what didn't work and avoid that. And I think that by using those other states as laboratories, we can adopt those programs in Hawaii and Montana that work best right out of the chute, and we can have kids be successful quickly, much more quickly than they were in other states.
So right now, you're going to see on the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a link to the Hawaii Family Forum website that can plug you into your legislator here in Hawaii. And what I'm asking you to do is, why don't you take a moment to send a really nice letter to your legislator, first of all, to thank them for all their hard work during COVID-19. Whether you agree with what happened or not, legislators worked really hard to make sure that the people in our beautiful state of Hawaii were safe. Give them a quick email and then ask them, you know, what they think about this decision in Montana and how can we bring this great system to Hawaii and to allow you as a parent to choose the best education for your child. We'd really appreciate that. And if you'd like to send a quick thank you note to Jeff for all of his work, again, you can visit the montanafamilyfoundation.org website and you can send him a great thank you and maybe visit him on Twitter and Facebook and thank him for all his good work. But remember, Jeff gave us those statistics. Hawaii is one of just a handful of states that is not part of this great movement for school choice. So let's get that conversation started. And Jeff, we really thank you for sharing your mana'o with us today. And we look forward to the great work that you are yet to do on behalf of the kingdom of God for faith, family, and freedom.
Amen. Thank you, sister. Lord bless you guys.
Thank you so much. And audience, viewers, we'll see you again in a week. Mahalo.
Aloha keakua.
If you liked today's video, don't forget to hit like, share it with a friend, and hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified every time we upload a new video. We really appreciate Kalo TV and their partnership to make this happen. So go ahead and click that button. I know you want to.